The Brehon Laws were committed to writing between the years AD 650 and 750 and belonged to the earliest Irish manuscript writing, while the language was highly technical. As in our statutes nowadays, some of the words were antiquated even when they were written down, and these had to be interpreted under great difficulties with the aid of ancient glosses. Taking that into consideration, it had to be agreed that the work of O'Curry and O'Donovan, the translators, was stupendous. Legal manuscripts were more like reference manuals to help serve a law student's memory, but were not instructional or educational manuals as such. They did not seek to expand or explain the finer points of law, because a Brehon was required to learn and to store all his knowledge of the laws and procedure to memory, be able to recall it at will, rationalise and apply it to the facts at hand, account for varying circumstances, try to find a principle in nature that could be used as an analogy to describe the issue, and finally pronounce the judgment as a poem according to the rules of poetic syntax and grammar. The manuscripts merely served as a sort of a bullet point nudge for those in the know. This made translations and comprehension quite challenging for modern scholars. From John A. Costello's The Leading Principles of the Brehon Laws, quote, "From the detailed character of the law books, one writer has hazarded the theory that the law tracts which we now possess consist merely of the statement of those rules of law which, owing to their detailed nature, could not be retained by the most tenacious human memory, and which it was, therefore, necessary to reduce to writing. Another writer considers the contents of the tracts to be merely headings or notes of lectures. It is conceivable, therefore, that the Brehons had a clear perception of the general principles underlying the immense volume of legal rules, and that they only required the minutiae to be reduced to writing. The laws were adapted by jurists of the different periods to suit the conditions of their times by glosses and commentaries written into the manuscripts, and so this led to a sort of continuous legislation. A curious aspect of this was that those jurists all seemed to be able to reach agreement. While there are a plethora of legal tracts and manuscripts treating all sorts of topics, from the honour price of kings to beekeeping, the laws of the Fenechis are generally divided into two great law books, known as the Seancus Mór, which is roughly translated to mean the Great Ancient Law Code, and it generally covers what we might call today a civil code. What we might generally call today a criminal code is contained in the Book of Achill, which legend attributes to the great King Cormac MacArt, who is said to have wrote it after he lost a kingship, having suffered a serious wound in battle, when he received an arrow to his eye. It is a long-held custom under Brehon law that a blemished king should not hold the kingship. In addition to the Seancus Mór and the Book of Achill, the other main legal manuscripts include the Brehon Law, which means the judgments of the noble or privileged classes. This is comprised of a collection of manuscript fragments which are grouped together due to similarity of style. These manuscripts are thought to all originate in the Old Irish Brehon Law School and were composed early in the 8th century in Munster. The Brehon is made up of 2 volumes, the Chorus Brehon and the Brehon Tuasach. Its focus is on the poets and bards and the other privileged classes, and includes passages about fosterage, sureties, pledges, and land law. Hodder M. Westrop commented on the Brehon saying, quote, "There is abundant evidence to prove that some of the collections of the Brehon are of equal antiquity with the oldest manuscripts of Irish history, whether civil or ecclesiastical." The Uircecht Beg. Uircecht Beg translates from the Old Irish to mean a short primer. It has a wider range of subjects than the Brehon because it is expanded to include commoners and the Éistano or men of art, and those of lower professions. In dealing with the poets, the Uircecht Beg covers the 7 grades of poets, the payment they were owed for their various types of poems, along with their relative honour prices. A line from the Urukek Beg reads, "He who is not well qualified is not well remunerated." The Crick Gavlach. Written around 700 AD, the Crick Gavlach means branched purchase. It covers the laws of status and franchise, the duties between lords and subjects, categories of freemen. Like the Urukek Beck, the Crick Gavlach details varying lay grades along with their corresponding honour prices. It shows how early Ireland operated as what we might call a renter economy, where those of lesser wealth rented land or stocks from those of greater wealth, thus creating a legal relationship of clientship, similar to the sort that was seen between pledges of fealty and protection between kings of greater or lesser degrees, and this, in turn, was reflected in a carefully defined and intricate social hierarchy. The Chorus Beskna. While the Chorus Beskna covers several areas, its principal focus is on the law of contract. Its opening line reminds us, quote, "The world would be evilly situated if express contracts were not binding." Additional topics covered here include the rules of evidence, the duties and rights of husbands and wives, fosterage and children, and the rules of inheritance. It contains further information on general rights and duties, such as the duty of a clan to support every clan member, or the right of a father to confiscate his lands from a son who fails to dutifully take care of him. Collectio Canonum Hibernans. While this text is not specifically Brehon Law, it is still relevant to discuss because of its impact on the canon law and Irish society. It was described as, quote, "the most ambitious endeavour to codify Christian life of all the medieval canonical compilations." Ireland was a Christian as well as a pagan island, and Christianity had been long established during the time when the law manuscripts were being written down. There are other types of manuscripts such as the Breha Dian Cecht, covering medicine, maintenance and injury, the Bech Breha, meaning bee judgments on the management of bees, the Cain Lánamhna, the laws of coupling, and many others covering all different aspects of social and daily life. This image is extracted from the Seancas Mór. We've already discussed how these manuscripts were written in an archaic dialect known as Old Irish, but as we're about to see, they were sometimes written using an intricate syntax and sentence structure. The four large lines of text are principles of law from the Seancas Mór. The smaller lines of text provide commentary on the larger text principles. It is not uncommon to also find even smaller text glosses, which are additional commentaries added by later scholars, but there aren't any glosses on this particular example. So let's start by numbering the lines of large text, and we see there are 4. Numbering the lines of small text, we get 17. For most of us, the natural tendency is to read a page from top left to bottom right, but that is not how to read an early Irish law manuscript like the Seancas Mór. To read the text correctly, we start at the line of large text with the larger capital letter. Then we read up and then we read down. So we begin on the second line of large text first, the line with the large capital letter sticking out here. Second, we would read the top line of the large text, then the third line of the large text, and finally the fourth line of the large text. Once we have read these 4 large lines, we can move to the commentary. But again, we do not start at line 1 or near the top of the extract. Instead, we begin at line 8, shown here. Line 8 comments on the line of large text directly beneath it. Then we read upwards to lines 7, 6, and 5, then part of line 4, part of line 3, the remainder of line 4, the remainder of line 3, then line 2, and finally line 1. After this, we would resume at line 9 and work downward through the lines in a similar fashion, sometimes moving upward, sometimes moving downward, allowing yourself to be guided by the context.